Hi everyone. My name is Dhurv Mishra, and I've got rank 109 this year in 2017. This was my second attempt in the CSE exam, and in my first attempt I went till the interview but couldn't make it by about 20-25 marks. But this time I've got a better rank than last year. So something about me. I've passed out from IIT BHU in 2013 with mechanical engineering, and after that I didn't do a job. I joined an MBA in MDI Gurgaon, and I passed in 2015. So it's been 3 years since I have been preparing for this exam. So as I've already told, I've given 2 attempts at this exam. So I'll talk generally about what I did and how I, prepared and something that can help you out as well. So first, in my first attempt in preliminary, if I'll start with the preliminary exam. So in the first attempt, I got 148 marks in paper one, and in my second attempt, it reduced somewhat to about 134. But done very similar things in both my attempts. So I'll just share what I did. So in standard books and all, I'm not going to get into because the list is almost similar for everyone. So one thing I did consistently was the test series that I had joined. So the test series, I religiously attempted ForumIAS simulator and Insights test series. So I have not missed a single test in the last 2 years that I've given this exam. So what I strongly believe is that test series helps you maintain a schedule. It helps you revise, and some areas that we have not covered in our daily resources like books and newspapers, we tend to forget them, tend to overlook them. But the test series covers them all. So my and even one more advantage was that as some of you might know, there were only 18 days after the last year's result. That is 2016's result came on May 30th, and there were only 15 days for the prelims next year. So I didn't make it, so I had to give the pre. So what I was doing was I had attempted both these test series since December also. So I had maintained a diary for some questions that I didn't know, that I hadn't come across in the newspaper. So I had a small diary about 150, 200 pages. So in those 15 days, I did not touch anything else but revised that diary itself. So what it helps is that the same thing you read again and again, it marks itself in your memory, and you can't forget it forever. So that is one thing that I focused on in both my attempts. And another thing is that if you look at my attempts in the both preliminary in the last year and also this year, I attempted 84 questions last year and I got 77 of them right. And then again in the second attempt, I got 64 right out of 70. So I'm not a big supporter of attempting 95, 99 questions and getting 30 of them wrong, and hoping that 65 correct and 30 right will get you through. So I believe in accuracy, and that is what I suggest to whoever listens basically, that you attempt those questions. 55, 60 marks of 60 questions will absolutely get you through, because you look at the cutoff, it is 116 for last year. That is 58 questions, and 105 marks for this year. So it is 53 questions. So I mean, that is what I suggest, that you maintain a 55, 60 question target. And then if you can guess some of them, then go for 10, 15 odd questions. Don't attempt 95 questions. That is what I suggest. But, some people, everyone has a different strategy. So that's quite okay. And about maintaining notes in current affairs is a big problem with a lot of people, and it was a problem for me as well. So I used to keep random notes, read something on the newspaper and note it down in my Word files, or write it down in my copies. So what I started doing is that I organized them into different headings and maintained a doc file and Excel file for each of these things. So let's say my headings would be national bodies, so that would include any and all news that will concern, let's say, a CVC, a National Crime Records Bureau, a police, or EPFO, a pollution control board. So whatever information comes out about that organization, you write it down in the national bodies. Then you make a separate doc file for international bodies. So if there are any, let's say, news about UNHRC, there is some news. Then there is some news about UNESCO. There is some news about the Syrian Observer Foundation. So you just keep a note on that and keep adding on those issues. So you get a nice chunk of facts and information that you can easily remember because it is organized. So, and also when you're reading the newspaper, I used to, first I didn't do that, and because of that I, skipped a lot of information. So therein, I used to read the Hindu. So there are diagrams that are there. So at the base of that diagram, the source of that stat is mentioned. So, so let's say a diagram on climate change is taken up from an IPCC report. So there would be mentioned source IPCC. So you read about IPCC. What is IPCC? What is it made of? What is its mandate? When was it actually established? So you don't have to read these organizations separately. So I mean, at the end, there are some compilations that come from different areas. Like Forum has a compilation, Insights also has a compilation. Then Vision also comes up with PT 365 and stuff like that. So you can scan through your notes and mark whatever that is not in your notes and complete that. So you won't need to actually depend upon these compilations at the end, although they are pretty good for final revision. But I think our own notes are better than any of the compilations that you will get. So what they help is that if you have skipped some data, you can mark them in your copies. So that is about organizing that. So I think on the platform also, some of the notes that I have made will be shared, so we can have a look at that. And then again for final revision, I've got, I don't have them right now, but I'll share it, that there are about hundreds or 200s of small chits that I have with only keywords that are mentioned there. So I mentioned IPCC, right? So I'll just mention IPCC was in the news and I have a chit for that. So I'll just stay for 5 minutes on that and I remember whatever I can about that keyword. So there is IPCC, there might be some scheme that has come recently. There might be some national park that was in the news. So you close your eyes and remember whatever you can about that. So I've got hundreds or 200s of chits. So whenever I used to travel to the center, maybe staying overnight a day before that, so you revise only those chits. You don't open your copies. You don't open your Vision, PCC 65 or Forum compilation, none of that. So you just remember those keywords. And my focus was on less resources and more revision. So the less resources you have, the more lesser confused you are. So you revise all of them again and again. So I think that is more helpful than reading a lot of books. So you'll find that I have not read many books that are mentioned by a lot of people. But that is not the way everyone should go. You should find your own way, but this is my way. Right. And another thing that I included in my notes was previous year's questions, not just of UPSC, but also from CDS, NDA, CAPF exams that are conducted by the UPSC. So you'll find very obscure questions that are asked in some of these exams. So you note them down. You don't worry about from where it has been picked up from, why, how will you read that. You just read them as notes, and you mention the facts in your copies. So that helps quite a lot. So I have a thick notes of all these questions. So CDS is conducted twice, 2 times in the year. NDA is also conducted 2 times a year. CAPF every year. So you have a thick resource for last year questions, and these are very factual questions, not analytical questions that are asked in some questions are there in UPSC. So you'll have more facts from these resources. And about obscure questions, I don't think we need to worry much about obscure questions, because anyways we don't have to do all 100 questions. 60, 70 questions, I think it's more than enough. And even if you leave obscure questions and don't run about them, then it actually helps with the things that are regulation and you remember them better. And about coaching and reading, how much time do you have to spend? I did also coaching at I had one of the institute in Delhi itself. So for adding to the 2 hours of coaching classes, I studied 8-10 hours every day. So I've never studied less than 8 hours for the last 3 years, but it can go up to 14, 15 in the last few days, 1-2 weeks. But 15 hours is not sustainable in my opinion. I couldn't do it for more than 3-4 days. So 8-10 hours, 10 hours is I mean, more than sufficient if you're doing coaching also, but not less than 8 hours. That is what I think. You need to be in that preparation mode. Then about also some facts that I have collected, some extra resources that I have consulted is that GS manual is there for prelims from Spectrum. That is a thick book about 1200 pages. So there are tables and boxes in those in that book. So especially for modern history. So you'll find very obscure facts in that book. So there was a question on Butler Committee. So that was exactly mentioned on Spectrum table in one of the Spectrum tables. So you'll find tables about newspapers and publishings by different national leaders. So you'll find Tabernacle of New Dispensation that was there by K.C. Sen in the last prelims in 2017 prelims. So I knew I had read that, so I knew that. So I think you can call it lucky. But yeah, there are facts that are not mentioned in regulation textbooks that is there in this book. So yeah, there, and it is neatly organized. So you can actually have a look at that and see if that helps you. Then also there are the economic survey was there. So you don't read it for mains, but for prelims also. So there are boxes, there are tables, there are keywords. So you mine those keywords and you find definitions of them. Some of them might end up in the prelims exam. So I think that is more than, I mean, that is about what I did for the preliminary exam. And for the mains exam, my main focus was on, this year the main focus was on practice and answer writing and, structuring my answer, finishing the question paper. That was one thing that I couldn't do in the last attempt that I made. So I left about 12 questions in all GS papers. So I mean 12 in total in all 4 papers. This year I just left one because I found that I could write more. I mean I could write faster this year, and this was because I had practiced quite a lot. And mainly I joined the mains guidance program MGP at ForumIAS. So the work was not so much on content but more on structure, because content more or less when you're reading for 2.5 years, everybody has similar content if they have read the standard reference books and some of the some of the things that people who have got ranks suggest. So content is more or less the same. The work was on structure. So structure is also not a very something out of this world, but just the intro, body, and conclusion part, that you have to find what you need to write in the introduction. So that helped that I had a structure for each type of answer, each type of question that could be asked. So if there is a factual concern, you can start with the definition. So there is a nice video by Neon also on the platform that was taken about 2 years ago. So that is one video that you should watch if nothing else. So you'll understand what is intro, what is body, and what is conclusion. And even if I wrote intro body last time, I did not end it well, end the answers well. So you always end with a way forward. You always end with a way forward. You write a conclusion, you write your opinion, you write your recommendation, whatever committee that you can remember related to that, whatever sustainable development goal that you can remember for that question, whatever economic survey, ARC, whatever resource you can remember that can be mentioned, you write in the conclusion. I mean, mandatorily you should write it, and I think that that makes a lot of a difference for 1-2 marks, and 1-2 marks in across 20 questions makes it about 30-40 marks. So that should not be left. And the second thing is that you finish your question paper. Even if you write average answers for all questions and finish the question paper, if you're not written a very bad answer for three, four questions, then I'm sure 100 plus words is not a very big feat. So if you finish the question paper, even with average answers, that is well and good. And again, my resources, as for prelims, there are hundreds of small chits that I maintain for every topic. Every topic that is a final revision. But before, when you're maintaining your building your content, you're organizing your content in and organizing contents in headings that are mentioned in the syllabus. So there are small topics that are mentioned through the entire syllabus. Let's say globalization, urbanization, regulatory bodies, bureaucracy, international relations, international body, disaster management, whatever. So you maintain separate folders or files for these headings in the headings in our syllabus. So I had about 54 files. So there are those clip files that we use in schools. So I used to attach A4 papers, about A4 papers every day to those files. So there are newspaper articles. Then I found some articles on the net. Some website I found an article. So if I find that relevant, I insert that A4 into that file. So I've got 54 files for every 54 files for like all the. So it covered all the points that are mentioned in the syllabus. So I didn't have to look up where I had written something about somebody that was there in 6 months ago. So I had that compilation. So that helped quite a lot. So I think in any way you can organize it. You can do an Evernote, you can do an Excel or Doc or whatever. So, but you have to have it organized. So when you look up disaster management, you have everything that is needed for that. You have the static part, you have the current affairs part, and everything you have in that file. So you don't have to go searching for your resources. So you have to organize mandatorily, right? And then for refining my answers, I had a look at toppers answer sheets that are available, that at MGP mentors also, and also at different websites. Some people have shared their answer sheets, so you can have a look at that. But you do not copy content. That you cannot copy because his resources, her resources would be different, and your resources, your notes would be different. So you copy the structure, and there's no shame in copying. You copy the structure, and definitely there are people who have have had a better structure than we have. Some people who have not made it. So I think if you can copy the structure, that is wonderful. And about the one more thing that helps is having frameworks, right? So I'll give an example of ethics paper. So you have a fixed flow in ethics case studies, right? So I had this in my mind before writing case studies. So you have an intro of 3 lines, maybe a gist of the case study, and if you can find the real problem, you can write 1 line about that, right? Then I went on to make a stakeholder diagram. It is quite you can find it in some answer sheet of toppers copies as well. So a number of stakeholders that you can find, you depict it through a flow chart, some circles, some boxes, some flow diagrams, so that you have you don't have to write it in sentences. So then from stakeholder diagrams, I'll move on to a table. So if there are, let's say a standard question would be that evaluate these choices, make up your own choices and evaluate it pros and cons, and what step will you take. So I had a table with all the options, and then two columns divided in pros and cons. So that is the structure I followed. And finally, as I said, you have to have a way forward, a conclusion, whatever you can remember about it. Any report, any speech, any public persons had said something about it, you write it in the final 2 lines. So you end it you end it in a structured manner. That is very important, I think. And another thing that helped me was having definitions, right? So in there are syllabus, there are things mentioned, keywords mentioned everywhere. So let's say there is an urbanization, there is a globalization. So whenever some question comes of that sort, you don't sometimes you don't know how to start it. We directly jumped onto the question. So you start with the definition of globalization. Whatever simple definition that you can remember, you start with that definition. That makes up your intro. So for everything you do that. And in paper 2, you can start with whatever article you can remember about the question. About, let's say, paper 3, there is a question on public-private partnership. So you mention 1 line, what is public-private partnership, and then start your answer. So if you've got less time, then there's not an issue. You start directly with whatever you know. So, but you maintain this flow that you write one thing that is contextual to that question in whichever paper you are attempting. In, let's say, in paper 1, there was a question on Gupta period, right? So you just mention Gupta period was from this AD to that AD, and you do not go on mention about what is the dynasty started, where it ended. You just mention the period, and then you start your answer. So you've got a reference point and you start it. So have a framework, and that is for every type of question. Have a framework that helps quite a lot. And once you start writing answers, etc., then you can find what I'm saying. But you have to write it on your own. Don't go about copying definitions of other people. And one thing also helps is in the final days you look at model answers prepared by different different test series model answers are there. Let's say ForumIAS will also give you a model answer sheet, model answers that are mentioned after every test. There are, you take another any other test series, they'll also give you that. So you have a look at model answers, what there are. So you don't go about the structure, you look at the content. So I'll tell you an example. So there are questions on left-wing extremism. So there are always questions in every test series about how India should go about solving the left-wing extremism problem, and there is a standard answer for that. There are three strategies that you need to do. Development is one, then security is one, and then people building the trust in the tribal people. So there are fixed steps that are there, and you'll find government initiatives that are mentioned in these model answers. So you look up these. Then there are disaster management. So you'll find definitions of disasters in those model answers. You don't have to go about looking up. Although I did what in disaster management I did was go through each and every file in the NDMA website and see what is the definition of each and every disaster. So there is a heat wave, so I remembered what is the temperature for a heat wave, what is the range for a heat wave. So you have to remember these exact things, so that adds value to your answers. If you can remember data specifics, then that also creates a difference in your answer. That will fetch you 1 or 2 marks extra, that I believe. And even in there are economy, there are growth statistics, there are per capita income statistics. So you mention those, you remember those. You will think that it is very difficult to remember data, but just few data that are important and you can use it every day. HDI data you can any day remember. Of some states you can remember, and overall also you can remember. Sustainable development goals with 1 to 17 you can remember. You can paste it in front of you every day and you look at it, you will remember it, trust me. So I have did that, so you can remember it. That is what I'm saying, that you just have the right resources and you can remember everything. And in terms of specifics of some of the papers, so I think more than notes and summaries, standard books help. So in paper one, for example, I have read Romila Thapar for early India. So that is one of the reasons I could answer the Gupta coins question. So I remembered it as a story. There was no synopsis on this question particularly because I had read it multiple times. So I remembered what I needed to write in that. So you go by standard books and you can answer these standard analytical questions. And similarly for geography is my optional as well. So that also helps. But in geography, even in GS, Khullar is a very good resource for paper 1 and paper 3 as well. So in Geo, there is mandatorily you draw diagrams wherever possible, and you'll find that in almost all cases you can you can make a diagram, you can make a flowchart in geography. That is a given. And then one thing that also helps in, let's say there is a topic social issues in paper 1, right? So there's mentioned globalization. So what do you do in globalization? That you note down different people will be affected by globalization. So you make a list of stakeholders that can be affected by this, right? So there can be women, children, elderly people, disabled people, tribal people, manual scavengers, urban women, rural women, labor, working people who are doing manual labor. So these are the groups of people that can be affected by globalization, right? So you find out how can we have already read stuff on this, right? So there are NCRTs, newspaper articles. So you make your notes under these headings. So that will help you structure your answer every time. And then you can mention government schemes for each of these people, like women, children, and what is the government doing to actually uplift these groups of people. So that is also help. That also helps. Then there is world history. So that is a very obscure topic these days. So some questions are asked, so we think that where it has been asked. But what I have found is that there is a focus on areas which have not been covered in these days, that has been asked. So let's say decolonization. So decolonization is a sort of topic that is not covered in any coaching notes and other things, but it is there in the standard books. So the standard book that I had read is Arjun Dev NCRT for world history. So there is one short paragraph on every country of every region in the world about colonization, about decolonization. So and that is why I could answer the question this year also about Southeast Asia. So you focus on what is the topic that has not been asked yet in world history. So I think more or less that will be the question, and every year in world history. And if there are regulation questions, then you are anyways prepared for it from your notes and the other resources that all of us read. So I have not read normal loaf because I think that is too bulky and that is unneeded, too much detail, and that is not being asked in our in our question paper anyways. So these are the some of the things that might help you in paper one. And I'm not again I'm not going into the standard reference books that I think everyone each who get a rank, who don't get a rank, everyone refers to it, and the content is more or less same, right? And in paper two, what I'll say is that I have improved upon my marks in paper two as well this year. So what I did was remembered the article numbers of important things. So even if you find that that is an obscure, something that won't be asked, that is very simple or very tough, you remember the article numbers. You remember the article numbers of Supreme Court, the President, the Parliament, and there is the special states article, that is 371 from ABCD, whatever the letters are, you remember that. And you may remember the mandatory and non-mandatory provisions of Panchayati Raj that is explicitly mentioned in our syllabus. And then you may remember the important cases. So I'll also share an Excel file where I have about 40, 50 landmark cases that have changed our constitution for good or bad, whatever. So you remember those cases. So even last time when there was a Coelho question, I had those in my notes also. So you add as much detail as you can in your answer. Specifics fetch marks. That is what I have felt even in the test series and even in the marks that I have got this year. So specifics are very important. You remember a committee. You remember some recommendation from second ARC. You mentioned second ARC says that. Even if it's a generic recommendation, you know that this must be there in a second ARC. You mentioned second ARC recommends this, right? In committee list also, you remember some committee, you write that committee's name in the relevant topic. So that is one input that I can share about this year's effort that I've made in paper 2. And in paper 3 also, my optional was geography, so that helped me quite a lot because economic geography, human geography, etc. These are topics that help in paper 3 as well. So one thing that I did was economic survey. I've read about multiple times, not just this year, but past 2 years also. So all the contemporary topics that are there in the news that are important, that would be important in the near future. So these are mentioned in the economic survey. So be it agriculture, be it PPP, be it banking reforms, NPAs, universal basic income was there just last year. So economic survey is a very insightful resource where you can find directly there are topics on questions that can be asked in our exam. So that is indispensable. So economic survey is a must. So you don't skip it, you don't read a summary. You read the economic survey and you keep it as a basic resource for economy portion of paper 3. And you supplement it with the newspaper articles that are mentioned on those topics. And again, model answers that I mentioned of, let's say, Forum, Vision, whatever test series you are following. So there are standard model answers for standard questions that are asked every year. Let's say, again, I'll go back to disaster management. If there are flood issues, then the flood issues will remain the same. The recommendations will remain the same. You add NDMA has recommended that, right? So that helps quite a lot. Again, definitions for every part of the syllabus. There is PPP, there is security, cyber security, and especially if there is, let's say I have mentioned cyber security. So whatever organizations are there in our country about cyber security, anyways, you would have noted down in the prelims section about national bodies as I have mentioned. So you organize that into your main answer. So whatever topics. Whatever there is in cyber security, you have a list of organizations. You have CERT in certain and other stand NC3I is there. So these are the things, these are the bodies that help in cyber security. Cyber security coordinator is there. Internal review committees are there in corporate sector. So and there is cyber security policy. So whatever there is from the government, you note it down and you mention it definitely in your answer. And about paper four, the extra that many people read it, but I've read Subba Rao, so many of us might have heard it. So it is a good book for the static portion about thinkers, about ideologies. So that is a good book to start. I have not read lexicon. I have not seen that book, so I cannot do comment on that. But Subba Rao is a good book. Then second ARC is indispensable for any portion. You will find last year you would have find the civil services code of conduct was directly from second ARC, and even Gandhi's seven sins. So you'll be many of you have found it may have found it out, but on the second, third page of the second ARC, Gandhi's seven sins were mentioned as a quote on the second ARC. So fortunately, I had read that and I remembered it. I still couldn't write the seven. I wrote just six, but at least something was there. So second ARC is a very indispensable source for ethics, and you have to read it. That is indispensable. And case structure I have already talked about in the earlier part. So you have a framework and you stick to it. Whatever the question, you stick to your framework. So that helps quite a lot. Although marks in ethics have been on the decline this year, but it's not been a fiasco. So we can count on that. So yeah, that is what I had to share. And if there are any questions, I am on active on forum as well. I'll make sure I'll share some of the note making things that I have done. So you'll find it on forum or any other place that I share it. And all the best to everyone. Thank you.